Hello, Ollie.
We have Janvi Brown here, our designer, who worked with Mike and with the team for many months to provide our wonderful set design, and we want to just talk today about really that process from when you first talked to Mike and how you came up with what you came up with.
Right. We started working on it in December. Although I think I said if we could have it all finished by December, I'd be really happy because I've got a very busy summer coming up. And it didn't quite work out like that, but the theory was there. It's a long time since I've worked on a Jacobean piece. It's a long time since I've worked on a Shakespeare because I tend to work with new writers. That's my bag. Hence I do a lot with the Stephen Joseph Theatre, and I work a lot in the Round, which is a sculptural space. So I was intrigued by the actual theatre architecture, the space at York University, being a sort of hybrid of what I knew with the VOMs and the four-stage, but then having a proscenium to play with as well, which is something I haven't done for a long time. And as a post-feminist artist, I was very interested in the play itself and about women's. All my work, my actual artwork, is based on stories women tell me or women's stories from history. So to look at the Dutch courtesan and to look at women in London at the time was for me a really exciting thing to do. And I was quite shocked by what I read. And I read a script which was not adapted, as in not worked on at that point, and it took me a long time to get to grips with it. So that was great to actually intellectually have to kind of really chew over every word and find out what it meant. I did a lot of work when I was doing my degree in German drama at Goldsmiths on Grimmelshausen and Simplicissimus, and so I was used to 17th century German texts, but so I've always liked that colloquial slang that goes along with it. And then Mike said we're setting it 30 years in the future, so that was equally interesting. So I came at it very much as a post-feminist, and obviously Michael isn't necessarily. Well, possibly. Doesn't have the letters after his name, I don't think, quite yet, but we're working on it. And so for me, it became an interesting idea of how it's about buying and selling, it's about commerce. There's a very good essay on the website about people buying and selling in London, Liverpool, don't know where that came from, in London at the time, and what that meant in terms of status and class. So obviously the fact that we're buying and selling women in terms of Dutch courtesan, and the marriage contract, the marriage contract that Freeville's about to enter into with Beatrice, I found really quite interesting. And obviously I designed the costumes as well. That's a whole different ballgame. We can start talking about costumes and the characterisation potentially later. So buying and selling 30 years in the future. And reading the play, we are going from location to location very swiftly, and we have to do so very fluidly. So recreating a world which could be London in 30 years in the future, which is to do with buying and selling. And when I say buying and selling, I suppose I'm thinking marketing. So the set that you saw or will see when the film is out starts from a barcode. No, not a barcode, a QR code. And QR codes are just something I'm starting to get to grips with because I don't have an iPhone or one of those phones that does this sort of thing. However, I was interested in the idea of wrapping wrapping structures, of structures having false faces, having a false facade, literally a facade. And I thought of scaffolding around buildings and the fact that you now print quite often in London the picture of how it's going to look on the webbing that covers the scaffolding for safety purposes, so people don't fall off. So, wrapping and unwrapping and layers and onion skins and is what you see, what you get, was all part of the thought process. So, QR codes. We were looking at Banksy as well. I can't remember at what point Banksy came into it, but his look, the way he will graffiti political statements on buildings. We wondered whether Cockle de Moy would be an urban graffiti artist of sorts, whether to have him in a hoodie at one point, whether he could spray onto the set and change things. So we were going down this route, or I was going down this route, and I think Mike was a little nervous that it might be too much, it might take over. And I suggested that he looked or took the point that I was going to actually create a floor which was an excavation, an archaeological excavation. So if you can imagine a Roman mosaic floor being uncovered, brushed away by today's archaeologists. In 30 years' time, if they were brushing away, when they scratched the surface, what would they find? Would it be a QR code? So this is where it came, but it also linked very much to, and the reason I came across the QR code was I was looking at the V&A at their Jacobean artifacts, and they have a wonderful wooden house front which links very much into those wonderful knot gardens they designed. So I was looking at these in terms of finding a language, a key to open the door to the physicality of what might be rostrum, what might be building facades. And I came across a QR code and clicked on it, and there was this Jacobean knot garden. And it was a bit of a light bulb eureka moment, really, when I went, aha, yes. So if we're buying and selling, what are we buying and selling? Well, we use QR codes to do that. When it comes down to black and white, when it comes down to either barcodes or QR codes, is that what we're seeing in terms of our relationships? Is this the way ahead? I believe they're thinking now introducing colour QR codes, but that's interesting. So I suppose designing a show like this, there are many layers of thought processes which you can't actually go, well, first of all I thought this, and then I chatted to Mike, and then we thought of that. I always like when working with a director as a good game of tennis. An idea gets knocked across the net, and sometimes the idea goes out, and sometimes a really good rally or volley. And the ideal situation then as director and designer is when you get to the first night, you can't actually remember who had the idea, because it should be that holistic. And then of course you have the lighting designer, Rob, as well, to come in and add another layer of interest and colour and light and shade. And then of course you go into rehearsals, and the director and the actors bring light and shade, and in some ways I'm quite divorced from that process, or I certainly have been on this show. And I think that's very interesting as a designer, then to present a model and then to come back a few weeks later or a few months later and see it realised, and then hope that the set does not get in the way, or the design does not get in the way of the play that it illustrates or opens doors for an audience as opposed to slamming them shut. It was fabulous to hear the text for me, to be painting the scenery backstage whilst they were rehearsing downstage, painting the scenery upstage, was just wonderful because I heard the play afresh, and I think some of the lines, well, one of the lines just has stayed with me to this day, when Freeville says to Franceschina, when she has dared to challenge him for the first time, "Don't turn witch before your time." And that whole idea that women at the age of 50 hit menopause and become useless, therefore surplus to requirements, therefore witches, absolutely blew my mind. To have that said so graphically in print to an audience throughout the ages, but at that point I just found extraordinary. And so the status of women, I think what the actors and Michael did so brilliantly at the end of them rejecting Freeville, of the two women coming together and having words, was really, really powerful. And that's what I love about the creative process, is you're not an artist as a theatre designer, you're not an artist who paints a picture and puts it on a wall. You have a dialogue with many different people, many different creatives within the team. And that the end product then still surprises you and can move and grow and change. It's just the power of theatre. It's why we do it. It's fantastic. Why would you ever do anything else?
Set always seems to me as being something, set design has to be something which incorporates, as you said, all sorts of very quick changing states and mould itself to suit a number of different things. Something which possibly doesn't have to in the same way as costume, and certain costume choices for certain moments can very much give an audience an immediate access into a scene, particularly in something which is from this period where language could potentially be a barrier. Also, costume is something which is very rooted in the characters of the play and the time and place from which they come. So I wondered if you could talk us through a bit about both the challenges of this particular play and how you came up with these designs, particularly when it has to talk both back to the early 17th century and to now plus 30, and how you got there.
Well, I think that it's very difficult to start thinking about costuming 30 years hence, 30 years in the future, when you're designing a play for an audience who will range in age but will be a predominantly young and funky audience, or old and funky, or even middle-aged and funky, but will have an eye for fashion. So if a director says, I want you to do Othello Jan in no particular period, the alarm bell rings and the light goes on, this is whoop, whoop, the alarm bells. And it's very, very hard, because as soon as you put one item of clothing bought in a shop today on stage, somebody will go, I've got that in red, or Auntie Ada's got that, or that's from Debenhams. So it's very hard. You can really distract an audience. So yes, a big challenge to do 20 odd plus costumes set in 30 years hence. So I kind of went back to Jacobean black and white timbering, and there's a lot of black and white in today. A designer will probably always be influenced by what by the zeitgeist about what's on trend today. They then choose whether to discard that or go with it. I chose to go with it. There's a lot of black and white, half timbering, Jacobean clothing going around today, luckily. However, I wanted to accent that then with very vibrant colours. And as soon as you put a prostitute in a red dress, you're really stymied, you back yourself into a corner. So, although I was looking for strong colours, strong primary colours to accent the design, the black and white design, I didn't want to be too obvious. Now, we did talk about William and Kate and the engagement dress, the blue number. And in the end, we put Franceschina in that colour and a similar style, which I quite liked, that bringing another dimension, if anybody got it. I'm not sure if they did. But I knew it was there, that little marker, a little bit of fun. The fact that the play was done at the wedding of James's daughter. A strange play to be doing as a wedding gift. So I thought that was quite interesting. Who else can we talk about? The red trouser moment came from Mr. Ollie Jones, who has a magic camera on his phone, or a magic hoard of photographs of Durham students, are they?
Possibly. Yeah.
Possibly, that would be saying too much. In their red trousers and their blue blazers, and it just seemed to chime with this gang of lads roaring around London. So that was very much a starting point. And of course, once you do that, then you go, okay, well then if Mr. Moneygrub is kind of would love to have been part of that world, and is just, well, not just missed it by a mile. So what does he aspire to then? So if that's our marker, if that's our young lads, then young up-and-coming chaps, where do we go from there? It's good to have one point where you can then go backwards and forwards. So Crispinella's also interesting. She wore the trousers. So she literally wore the trousers. And the wonderful line about her being high on the top and high on the bottom, wearing her Chopins to keep her skirts out of the mud and the filth of the streets, was great fun to work with. Mary Faux was very good fun as well. How do you do a brothel keeper this day and age? And we had great fun with the concept of the diamond skull and the skull which would be on your third middle finger as a brothel keeper. And we were very lucky to work with a bunch of students who looked fabulous in everything. So not often that happens. It's always difficult putting an actor into a costume before they start working on the play. What was lovely was we actually were able to go in with quite a big stock of costumes to choose from and work with the students when they were in rehearsals, so that they had some input and could see how they could maybe work with that. Have I missed anything?
Don't think so. I can't. Anything else? But I think that's great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.